Chapter 22. The Temperate Spirit.
How long has it been since the last time? Venerable 16, 18 years.
They were sitting at the foot of a steep bluff. There was a large enough opening in the rock face to shelter a makeshift camp from the cold wind of the ice-covered peaks. Beyond the flickering light of the small campfire, the silhouettes of the forest were shrouded in the darkness of the night that was soon to end. The first light of dawn already caressed the hidden horizon with a soft, pleasant glow. Soon the intense glare from Yelm would pierce the veil of darkness. Ishmant was contemplating the emerging outline of the star as the half-elf posed the question. The mysterious figure turned his eyes away from the night sky for a moment and looked at the human half-breed. Little, if anything, had changed since then. His elven blood would give him the same smooth skin of youth for generations to come.
What are 20 years in the life of an elf?
Garin took a seat beside him, warming his hands by the fire. It was often chilly in these early hours of dawn, and one should not forsake the heat that the crackling flames provided.
20 years is 20 years, Ishmant.
The elf replied.
Our bodies may not betray the passage of time, but time marches on relentlessly for humans and elves alike. The absence was the same for you as it was for me. Those 20 years have passed for us as well. We are no longer who we were. There are ways you can tell. Perhaps not in the wrinkles of the face or the whiteness of the hair. But there are ways to tell that an elf has aged.
He glanced behind him for a moment. Alwen stood near the main fire tending to Claudia, whose fever had taken a turn for the worse.
You speak of him, do you not?
Said Ishmant.
I have noticed it. I see something in his gaze that I did not perceive before.
Garin turned his glowing eyes back to the human warrior.
I'll tell you what it is, my friend. Hatred and anger. Alwen has disowned his elven roots. He has nothing but contempt for the elves, who he regards as egoistic and frivolous. All that remains is the Tusek Firok, who was once his father. Alwen is full of rage and hatred, and it is that uncompromising hatred, the legacy of Mostal, that makes him long for a new dawn.
I heard about what happened to Ariel and Bale. I'm truly sorry,
said Ishmant, with a mournful look on his face.
The Dore monks supplied me with a boat. It allowed me to cross the waters to the mouth of the Tarim. The battlefronts trapped me miles upstream, and I had to divert my course to Empire City. Any attempt to reach the border with Armen would have been foolish. I lost all contact with you all, and other grave matters required my presence in Belhador.
Ishmant also looked back at the enigmatic half-dwarf behind him.
He's not over it yet, is he?
Over it?
Exclaimed Garin, lowering his voice at once.
Does anyone ever really get over something like that? Yes, I suppose, in his own way. But he has left behind his humour, his gaiety, his vitality. The young, irreverent warrior you knew then is now a ruthless killer, capable of carrying out the most unthinkable of deeds. I have seen him kill without the slightest sign of compassion.
He was always like that, even in his youth.
The war, the loss of Ariel, that hardened him. It wounded him in a cruel and merciless way. Every time he kills the vermin serving Kala, he gets a little revenge, and his hatred is quenched for a time. If you had seen him do what I have seen him do.
Garin put his hand over his mouth and lowered his voice to a whisper.
He spent years soaked in the blood of his victims. He became a predator, nothing more than a ruthless wild beast.
Garin sighed at the memory.
He has been drinking Hevra's nectar for a long time. He says it helps him stay awake. But in truth, it consumes him from within. It worries me, Ishmant. It worries me a lot.
He is a Tusek. His father was a heavy drinker of Hevra, like most of his line. The war has bestialized all of us. It has brought out our baser instincts, but it has also tested us. We are still here when others are gone. I see a toughness in your words, a strength of will that they lacked. I see the passing of the years and the struggle within you too. You too have changed, Garin, son of Vala, beau of the Sanshari. Where is the sharp-tongued rascal who thought only of enticing carefree maidens between his sheets?
Garin smiled ruefully, almost blushing. Ishmant also smiled.
By Alda! Is it true I was like that once?
As true as you breathe, boy.
They had changed. It was true. They weren't who they used to be. It was more obvious in some than others, but none had escaped the ravages of time. Ishmant was human. A very special human, no doubt, but human nonetheless. He too had changed, in his own way. His usual dark hair now shone with a dull copper hue. Where it had once lay around his shoulders, it now stretched down his back. The energetic curls from before were gone. His hair was now smooth and straight. His face looked lightly polished, as if he was wearing makeup. Ishmant's face possessed a captivating magnetism that needed no synthetic embellishment. But no doubt such a radical change in appearance was more a matter of survival. Ishmant had probably taken advantage of his slender body and harmonious features to look like an elf, with the help of a few cosmetic changes. At least, it had fooled Kala's henchmen up to now. At first glance, this seemed to be the only sign of aging in the warrior. And that was exactly why Garin took a closer look at him. 20 years ago, Ishmant had been an experienced warrior, a mature man. He had never revealed his real age, and he had a limitless vitality and an impressive physique that the most athletic would envy. But his experience and skills could only be explained by adding many more years to his age than he actually looked. Even if 20 years meant nothing to an elf, they should be noticeable in a human's appearance. And this mysterious human displayed no features that would indicate aging at all. Ishmant's age must have been close to that of an old man, but his face, apart from the color of his now tinted eyebrows, was the same as it had been the last time they had met. It had barely changed. Garin was silent for a moment, taking a deep breath before asking,
What have you done over the years? What lands have you roamed?
Ishmant raised his hand, indicating to the elf that he did not wish to answer that question, or at least not for the moment. The elf looked back behind him again, searching for the figure of Alwyn. He found him, as before, busy with his work.
We found your mark, the pendant,
continued Garin after his companion's initial silence.
Olwen was sure he would find you soon, but I dare say he did not expect it so soon.
The warrior's face relaxed into a half-smile, and his gaze returned to the smoldering ashes of the larger fire that had warmed and illuminated the cold, dark interior of the shelter during the night. This time, his pupils did not seek out the other half-breed who still watched over young Claudia's restless sleep. Instead, he scanned the shadowy interior for the other humans. There he found the huge Hansi lying back against the smooth wall, his hands clutching his wounded stomach. He seemed to be asleep, or at least was not moving. He could not be sure, for his eyes were not as accurate in the dark as those of the elf he pretended to be. That evening, Hansi could be thankful that he was still breathing. He assumed that the sprawling, shapeless lump lying beside him was the cream-haired youth they called Alex. When the warrior's eyes returned to look at Garin, he asked about them.
They're human, aren't they? A rare prize these days,
he said then.
Where did you find them?
It wasn't us. A group of orcs captured them. We were already in the cage.
Where did that happen?
Ishmant asked again, emphasizing his interest.
We crossed the wastelands. I never thought I'd find humans there. Certainly not in this day and age.
Where do they say they are from? They speak the common language without an accent.
Garin suddenly burst out laughing.
That was my doing, but it's definitely the best part of the story,
he said, leaning closer to the warrior and lowering his voice to a whisper.
You won't believe it.
I won't know what to believe until you tell me what you know.
Garin began to tell him the story from the beginning, in consummate detail, as elves are wont to do. Ishmant, far from being astonished, seemed very interested in the tale.
They call him Ishmant.
Odin craned his neck with difficulty. Alexis tried to sit up awkwardly, still showing signs of not having had a very comfortable night. He watched him shift uneasily in his posture, wondering how he could have probed his thoughts so precisely.
You were wondering that, weren't you? You haven't taken your eyes off him for a while. What time can it be?
He asked, as his mouth opened in a huge yawn.
My watch has stopped since we got here.
It'll be dawn soon, I think. You haven't been able to sleep either.
I don't think I'll ever get used to doing it on the stones. If there's one thing I really miss, it's a soft bed. And maybe a shower.
He would add after a short silence.
With hot water. Hot water.
He paled the concept with a tone of desire.
I'd kill for a hot shower and a soft bed.
It seemed as if Alex would close his wish list there. But he remembered to add something else.
And, maybe a beer. Or two.
Hansi couldn't keep a smile from his shadowed face. Then there was a moment of silence. Odin thought his companion had fallen asleep again, but new movements warned him that this was not true. Still, he kept an eye on the couple chatting at the entrance to the shelter, right in front of his eyes.
Was he the one who saved me?
The muscular young man asked, not knowing if he would get an answer.
Who healed you? Yes, I think it was him.
Alex replied, half asleep.
You came back from the clearing almost on your feet, accompanied by him. So I imagine he did the emergency healing, with whatever they do to close such wounds. Your wound looked nasty, but it wasn't bleeding anymore.
I don't remember any of that.
Again, there was silence. It wasn't the first time Hansi had opened his eyes that night, and it wasn't the first time he had talked to his companions. But he hadn't brought it up until now. His stomach was bound by the tightly woven bandages. A cold pain ripped through his stomach and spread down his legs, as if he had a sharp metal blade inside his body, cutting him with every little movement. He was weak, exhausted. It was partly due to his fragile health. But to explain this state of drowsiness, one would also have to look at the side effects of the broths and concoctions he had been forced to swallow. Days later, still in doubt, the musician asked about his wound. Despite the slight after effects and discomfort he had to endure for some time, he could not believe that he had been miraculously healed so quickly. In the end, the fatal wound would be reduced to an enviable scar across his abdomen. Odin was no doctor, but it didn't take one to know that wounds like his needed more than a wet cloth and hot broth.
We healed you with magic. How else do you think?
Garin would confess, somewhat surprised by the young man's question.
Ishmant was responsible. Orwen's spells or mine could not heal such a deep wound. At least not at the time. It may be able to speed up the natural healing process.
The elf went on.
But magic, at a superficial level of knowledge, cannot do everything. If the spell is not powerful enough, or the wound is too severe, additional additions and care are needed. Ishmant closed your internal tears and sealed the wound sufficiently that no stitches were needed. However, bandages and rest have also proved indispensable.
Odin looked at his stomach. A small, oozing spot painted the bands of cloth covering his wound. Alex was definitely asleep. He could hear his rhythmic breathing and the occasional snore from his strained posture. Soon he too was overcome by sleep. The sound of approaching boots forced Garin to cut his last words short. The owner of the footsteps approached them. Alwen let himself drop down beside them. He looked tired.
"Is the girl all right?"
Ishmant asked him. The half-breed parted his very long hair to look at the human, a withered expression in his green eyes. After a moment of silence, he answered,
"I think the fever is starting to break. Your Garda spores have worked. Tomorrow her head will ache as if a band of trumpeters were parading through her head. But she is out of danger. I hope."
Alwen sighed, keeping his eyes on the stony-faced human. He regretted that such a distraction, as necessary as it was, had postponed their conversation until so late in the morning.
"Dawn greets us as of old, Venerable One. It is a good beginning."
Alwen put his arm around the shoulders of the human disguised as an elf in a gesture of companionship.
"My heart beats happily, Arkmode. I confess I had given up hope of ever enjoying your noble presence again, Master. I welcome your return."
The half-breed squeezed the forearm of this sublime individual with emotion. Ishmant returned the warm gesture before speaking to him.
"My soul too is filled with joy at this reunion, Murahashi."
With a sincere smile on his face, Alwen pulled away from the warrior's touch.
"I see the hand of the inevitable has been kind to you, Ishmant, but how have the other gods treated you over the years? What has become of the tempered spirit in these desperate times? Have you heard from our old comrades?"
Ishmant raised his head, his eyes still engrossed in the flames of the tiny fire that burned at his feet. Then he looked up at Alwen.
"Not much, old friend. I was in Bellador during the war."
"In the castle?"
There was surprise at the news.
"Let us just say that the war kept me there. The rebellions in the heart of Armenia were swiftly put down, and the tasks of reorganization required my help. It was hard, but for a moment the Imperial forces believed victory was within their grasp. I lost touch with the group. You were all scattered in different places. I heard later that Lem had fallen at the Battle of Tagar."
Garin and Alwen looked at each other in an instinctual reaction and hung their heads in regret.
Yes,
The blonde elf confirmed.
we heard that too.
Torgaman returned to Tuhaasak, and my travels did not bring me back to the Dwarven realm. I do not know what has become of him, nor do I know of Rabahim or the Crested One. I found Keomara in the green harbors of the Pindaros River before the war broke out. She was leaving for the islands. I know little more about her.
"Keomara was with us at the Kelisar Pass after the battle."
Alwen added with some apathy. Garin looked at him in surprise. Alwen was talking about the tragic and bloody events at the city pass where Ariel met her death.
Rabahim and Olam were there too. The latter was on his way to the Othamar to warn his people. We have not heard from him since. Either he is dead or the Berserker bulls have decided to stay out of this conflict. I prefer to believe he is dead.
As he concluded, the silence could be cut with a sword. Garin waited hesitantly and anxiously for someone to speak. Ishmant looked into the green eyes of the dark-haired elf. Alwen looked intently into the face of the human warrior. There was no aggression in that look, not even tension. But Garin would not have bet a mouthful of stale bread on guessing what would happen next.
"I regret Ariel, as do the sons of the dragon, believe me."
More silence. Looks.
"I appreciate your condolences, Venerable, even if they are decades overdue, but allow me to spit on the false sorrow of that bunch of hypocrites. I will not allow those who martyred her in life to idolize her. those who condemned her and deprived her of her essence and rank. May the mighty Hergos forgive me, for I know she was called by him to ride his noble back. But I swear I will never tire of insulting his dogs and lackeys as if they wore the Sarah. In my opinion, they are no better than the cult.
Alwen spat on the ground, signs of anger showing on his face.
You are wrong, but I respect your anger.
All you bring is news of such an unworthy rabble?
The half-breed dwarf scolded the human warrior.
By the avenging berserker! What news did I expect you to bring? I'm glad to hear that you're alive. Have you heard of the Lord of Runes? If he has fallen as well, it will be a glorious end to a night of tragedy.
He helped me escape when Bellador fell. Then he retired to the Chambers of Knowledge to meditate and study.
Meditate and study?
There was more than a hint of sarcasm in Alwen's voice.
A subtle way of saying that he too has gone into hiding. Everyone with a bolt hole has gone to hide in it, I see.
Once the banner was broken at Bellador, his presence was of no value. On the contrary, the enemy knew of his existence, as well as that of the Chambers of Knowledge and what it held. He did what he had to do, Alwen. By vanishing from the world, the enemy's desire to find the chambers vanished with him. He left with the intention of searching through the volumes of knowledge for a formula that might help us counter the blight inflicted on our world.
A very noble gesture,
Alwen remarked with a mocking tone.
But I don't think there is any formula that can solve this.
Ishmant looked at the half-dwarf with such intensity that he managed to wipe the mocking smile from his face.
What seemed impossible yesterday,
he said with the calm authority of a master,
need not be so today. The only battle lost in advance is the one we choose not to fight.
The atmosphere had grown tense, despite a fresh dawn breeze brushing gently against their skin. Garin then tried to shift the conversation by asking a question that had been left hanging in the air.
You know what has become of us over the years. But what have you done, Venerable?
Ishmant settled back and looked at the pair of elves with a slow, careful gaze.
I sought a secluded place to take refuge for a while,
he finally announced.
I fled, if you prefer to call it that, to the north, to the northernmost reaches of the Nevada, and I hid there.
You fled? You?
Said the half-dwarf in obvious stupefaction.
That's right.
You fled.
The dwarf half-breed repeated, as if he could not believe it. Confusion fell upon the elven couple, fueled by a sense of disillusionment. In those moments, something hitherto immovable crumbled in each of their hearts. Silence fell over the place. A long, cold silence.
Unquantifiable must be the danger that haunts us when the most skilled of our number tries to hide like a rat in the sewers,
Garin said, still wide-eyed in shock from what he had heard only moments before.
We were either true heroes or the most foolish of fools not to follow your lead, Ishmant.
Ishmant remained calm, as if the elves were exaggerating their reaction to the news.
You did not have as much to fear or lose as I did.
He replied to Garin in that very gentle and cordial manner, his lips curled in an amiable smile.
It is not the elves that the cult persecutes and exterminates.
Just a moment,
exclaimed Alwen, who had been lost in thought for a few moments.
And what are you doing here now? What prompted you to leave your safe haven, Ishmant Ark-Mud, master of the Temperate spirit, and travel so far south?
They all looked at the fierce half-dwarf warrior as he continued to speak.
I am not so much interested in what mighty force made you run and hide. I know that. I have been there. What I really want to know is what compelled you to return.
Garin immediately understood the true dimension of Alwen's words, and soon had to admit that his companion had touched on a delicate subject. An idea suddenly assaulted his mind. Without being able to control it, he found himself staring at the humans lying in the shadows behind him. His forehead wrinkled into a frown as a thought occurred to him.
He wasn't looking for us. He was looking for them,
he suddenly deduced.
What do you mean?
Asked Alwen.
The humans. That's why he was so interested in the details of our encounter with them.
What? How? What do you mean?
The half-dwarf frowned in confusion. Ishmant fumbled in the folds of his pack for a moment, finally pulling out a sharp, shiny item which he displayed to the disbelieving eyes of his companions. At once the two thieves realized what it was. He was holding a piece of metal, several inches long. It was undoubtedly an arrowhead, the shaft of which had broken off at the level of the metal point. It was no ordinary arrowhead. On the contrary, it was slimmer and longer than normal, more deadly and aerodynamic. They soon realized from its undeniable contours that it had come from Olwen's skilled hands and Garen's quiver. The warrior dropped the shiny piece of metal at the feet of his companions. The elves fixed their eyes on the useless arrowhead.
Following your trail?
Ishmant said.
Proved far easier than extracting this from the neck of that wretched orc.
Garen's hand reached out to take back what had once been his.
What happened, old friend?
The blonde elf asked, now calm and collected. The human warrior took a deep breath before he answered.
I had a visitor,
he revealed later. The elves tried to interrupt, but they were waved away with a hand gesture.
As unexpected as it was decisive.
The warrior's hand again silenced their attempts to speak.
Rexor came to see me.
Rexor? You said he went to the chambers.
Garen was surprised.
I had been waiting for years for the arrival of the Warden of Knowledge. His presence would galvanize the movement. At last that time has come.
I hate it when you speak in riddles, Ishmant,
Olwen complained.
Has Rexor been looking for you? I know you both well enough to know something is up. What's that got to do with these humans there?
Maybe nothing, maybe everything.
Enough, Ishmant. Speak or shut up, but don't play with my patience.
I can't tell you much for your own safety. I can only reveal that Rexor is looking for a human.
Who?
Asked Garen, intrigued.
He does not know who he is. It is not someone he has encountered before.
The warrior monk assured them. Olwen thought everyone had lost their minds.
He's looking for someone he doesn't even know? Why? For what reason?
The half-breed tried to rationalize what he had heard, becoming more and more perplexed.
How will he find him? And what does that have to do with us or these particular humans?
I didn't expect to stumble upon your trail on my journey. As you can imagine, it wasn't planned. I didn't even intend to come this far south, but I know now that it was spun into the tapestry, and so it came to pass. According to Rexor, there are signs that make this human recognizable, and I have followed them.
Signs? What kind of signs? Like a physical description?
Ishmant seemed fascinated by the whole situation and was slow to respond. But he finally decided to reveal the truth.
It's a bit more complex than that, Olwen,
the warrior said, subtly asking for some patience.
It may seem like nonsense to you at the moment, but everything seems to indicate that the great magical fabric, the shroud, has been perturbed. Its strings have resounded.
The shroud? The great magic fabric? But what the...
It's an abstract concept, Olwen.
Ishmant interrupted him again.
And we may just be following a phantom. Please don't expect me to go into details, but believe me when I tell you that it was one of the reasons why I came out of hiding and am here now. I have followed its echo, its resonance, to its source. That explains my appearance so far south, and how I found your trail.
He added, raising that peculiar arrowhead again.
I found your signal right at the core. Theoretically, whatever made the magical fabric shake could have been there.
What do humans have to do with it?
The ebony-haired one asked. The enigmatic human remained eerily silent. Almost by instinct, all three companions sharing the fire turned their heads to the humans huddled in the shadows of the rocks. Light began to filter in from outside the shelter. For a moment, a strange and indefinable feeling came over them.
I trusted you to give me these answers, so I followed you. I could have approached you in the ruins of the Elven City, but I had reasons to leave you with the evidence that I was on your trail.
Garen quickly turned his head back to the sleeping humans, innocent and unaware of the truth. An idea formed in his mind. These humans...
Garen has told me what they told you and how you responded,
he added, looking intently at Olwen.
What to you seem like unbelievable stories from delusional minds, to me are possibilities to be explored. The history of these humans may fit the profile of those Rexor wishes to find.
Rexor was looking for these people?
Alwen frowned.
That makes less and less sense.
To Garin, however, it made more and more sense.
Rexor is looking for a human.
Ishmant repeated, emphasizing the last word.
A human with very specific qualities. If they are the source of the resonance, the reason for the discordance in the shroud, then perhaps the human we are looking for is among them. Maybe it is all of them. It's a possibility I'm sure Rexor hadn't counted on. In any case, you were right to take them with you and stay out of sight. I bet Rexor isn't the only one on their trail.
Who else is looking for them?
The archer asked.
By the pit.
What does it matter?
Interrupted Alwen, weary of so much mystery.
The question is simple. What are the characteristics of this human? Let's check, or ask them the right questions. If any of them is the one, then they will confirm it. But in confidence, Ishmant, if any of these wretched souls have anything to do with Rexor, I am a Stysian princess.
It's not that simple, my impulsive friend. Ishmant reminded him again.
This human may not even know what he or she really is.
And what should he or she really be?
Garin wanted to know. Ishmant looked at them both with a serious expression on his face. At that moment, they knew they would receive no further answers.
It is not for me to answer that question, nor is this the time or place for you to know.
Then who will answer? Rexor?
Alwen ventured.
Where is he now? Why didn't you travel together?
Garin wanted to know.
We divided our efforts. I went to search for the source of the resonance. He went to find a powerful ally for our cause. We arranged a place to meet again.
Where?
Ishmant turned to the dwarf half-breed.
I will lead you to him if you wish, but for the safety of all concerned, this is information that only I need to know for now. You understand, don't you?
It was always the same. Ishmant's appearance had always been accompanied by many questions. 20 years later, it wasn't any different. He appeared again and again like a ghost, and with him came the secrets and riddles.
I will show you a new path. These humans are now my responsibility. You may go your own way if you wish, but Rexor will be pleased if I return with you both. I did not expect to find you on the road, and we will have no shortage of allies in this new endeavor. If you wish to leave, I will understand. If you choose to continue, you must keep all that has been said in this conversation secret, especially from them, from the humans.
Garin and Alwen looked at each other. Garin was ready to agree, but Alwen stepped forward.
I'll need a few days to think about it, Ishmant. In the meantime, you are welcome in our company.
Dawn had broken. The great star god rose above the endless horizon. His reddish pupil barely lifted itself above the mythical boundary between earth and sky. It was still early. The rays of light had not had time to warm the surface of the ground, and snow still lingered in much of the forest. But there she was, Claudia. She didn't know why she had decided to wander a little further into the forest. But there she was, standing at the edge of a small, icy pool formed by the river as it flowed through a clearing in the trees. Half lost in her fur blankets, she peered into the frigid interior of its steaming, crystalline waters. There, like the stems of some exotic plant dipping its roots into the clear liquid, 3 male bodies emerged from the still waters. A stream of sharp, fluid crystals poured onto their backs, cascading from above into the icy mirror that formed the surface of the pond. Wisps of icy vapor escaped from its still, silent surface. It must have been unbearably cold. One of them, soft, feline in outline, smooth and clear. It was the body of Garin, the elf of humans. Another, unmistakably masculine, broad and muscular. It was Alwyn, the elf of enemy blood. The last, of perfect definition, of vigorous and sinewy fiber. He was the man of grave and intense presence they called Ishmant. All three carried their weapons. The long, slender sword of light forms brought by the newcomer, the broad, majestic steel of Garin, and the elaborate serrated sword bearing a woman's name, to which Claudia was just as inexorably drawn as she was to its bearer. They sliced the air with smooth movements, in an almost perfect synchronicity, indifferent to the icy cascade that pierced their bodies, with their long wet hair embracing their warrior backs, with their slender bodies in a slow, harmonious dance. Absorbed with the scene before her, the young woman contemplated and admired with fascination these three beings who ignored her presence. She knew from deep in her soul that these unusual elves and this unchanging human were not all they claimed to be, and that there would be many more stories to tell before anyone could show us the way back home.